Jun, move! Get out! Stop him!
Stay awake. The safety logs were his responsibility.
The explosion came before the accusation. A wall of heat slammed into my back, so hard that my chest hit the concrete floor. Metal screamed somewhere above me. Glass burst outward like rain thrown by an angry sky. My ears filled with a sharp ringing that swallowed every other sound. Then someone shouted my name. Jun, leave him. Get out. Another voice answered. He caused it. The words reached me more clearly than the sirens. He caused it. I tried to lift my head. The workshop ceiling was collapsing in slow pieces, sparks falling like burning snow. Smoke rolled across the ground until it became impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Every breath tasted like oil and blood. I hadn't touched the pressure valves. I knew I hadn't. Yet people were already looking for someone to blame. A steel beam trapped my right leg. I pulled. Pain exploded through my body. Nothing moved. Across the room, I saw Manager Wei crawling toward the emergency exit. His expensive jacket was on fire around one sleeve. Two workers dragged him forward while he kept pointing behind him. At me. Don't let him escape. Escape? I couldn't even stand. Another blast ripped through the factory. The floor lurched. Something heavy crashed between us. The last thing I saw before darkness swallowed everything was the terrified face of a young woman pinned beneath a collapsed conveyor frame. She wasn't screaming. She was trying not to. Pain has a strange honesty. It strips away pride, fear, excuses, and everything people pretend to be. When I opened my eyes again, the world smelled of wet cement and burned rubber. Rain. Someone was shouting outside. Rescue workers. The fire had mostly been contained. I tried moving my arms. My left hand obeyed. My right shoulder screamed in protest. The steel beam still pressed against my leg, but the weight had shifted just enough for me to breathe. Then I heard it. A whisper. Don't sleep. I froze. The voice hadn't come from outside. It sounded old, calm, as though someone had spent centuries waiting for this exact moment. She's still alive. The pinned woman. I turned my head. She had lost consciousness. Blood spread slowly beneath her. The conveyor frame crushed her waist. No rescue team had reached this section yet. Smoke hit us from the others. I looked toward the exit. If I shouted long enough, maybe someone would hear. Or maybe another collapse would bury us both first. I swallowed against the blood filling my mouth. I'm trapped. You are. The voice answered without emotion. So is she. I can't move. You can choose. I almost laughed. People like talking about choices when they weren't trapped under several 100 kilograms of twisted steel. The whisper returned. If you save yourself, you may live. It paused. If you save her. Silence. Everything changes. I don't know why I chose her. Maybe because nobody had ever chosen me. I was abandoned outside a repair shop before I was old enough to remember faces. Old Chun, the mechanic who found me, used to say that machines never lied. People did. Engines either worked or they didn't. Bolts were either loose or tight. Truth was simple inside steel. People made it complicated. He raised me among broken motorcycles, discarded engines, and customers who forgot my name 5 minutes after paying the bill. He died 5 winters ago. Since then, I'd repaired cars on sidewalks and motorcycles in abandoned parking lots. No family, no education, no connections. The factory job had been my first chance at stability, and now I was dying inside it. Maybe that's why I reached toward the unconscious woman instead of the exit. Nobody had ever reached toward me. Every movement tore something inside my leg. The beam shifted less than an inch. Enough. I pulled free. The pain nearly made me black out. I crawled. Each elbow dragged me another few centimeters across broken concrete. The woman's breathing had become shallow. Her employee badge hung from a torn lanyard. Lynn Sinney, Medical Equipment Division. Not a factory worker. Corporate office. Wrong place. Wrong time. The conveyor frame weighed far too much for one man. I pushed anyway. Nothing. Again. Nothing. Blood dripped onto the concrete from my forehead. My vision blurred. The whisper returned. Hands remember what minds forget. Something warm spread through my palms. Not heat. Something quieter, like warm water flowing beneath frozen ground. The pain in my hands disappeared. Green light flickered beneath my skin. I blinked. The glow vanished. Hallucination. Blood loss. Had to be. I placed my hands against the twisted steel one more time. This time, the metal groaned. Not because I became stronger, because something inside the frame seemed to yield. The impossible weight lessened. Only for a second. It was enough. I pulled her free. The moment she rolled onto the concrete, I collapsed beside her. She wasn't breathing. No. I pressed trembling fingers against her neck. Nothing. The whisper spoke again. Life recognizes life. Instinct moved my hands before thought could. One hand over her heart, the other against her forehead. Warmth poured out of me. Not painful, not violent, gentle, like sunlight after endless winter. Her body jerked. She coughed. Air rushed into her lungs. Color slowly returned to her face. I stared. What? Footsteps echoed nearby. Over here. Flashlights pierced the smoke. Rescuers. Someone found us. The whisper disappeared. When I woke again, the ceiling was white. Hospital. My leg was wrapped in thick bandages. An oxygen tube rested beneath my nose. A television mounted in the corner played silent news footage. The factory. Flames. Ambulances. Reporters. A headline crawled across the screen. Factory explosion under investigation. Employee negligence suspected. Employee negligence. No names. Yet, the door opened. A police officer entered with a notebook. Behind him stood Manager Wei. His arm rested in a sling. The moment our eyes met, I understood. He had already made his decision. The officer sat beside my bed. Mr. June. I nodded weakly. We need your statement. Before I could answer, Manager Wei sighed dramatically. I never wanted this. I stared. He avoided my eyes. The pressure safety logs were assigned to him. Lie. The surveillance system failed during the explosion. Lie. We warned him repeatedly. Lie. Every sentence landed with perfect confidence. The officer wrote everything down. No hesitation. No doubt. No questions. I realized something terrifying. Truth arrives slowly. Blame arrives immediately. When the officer finally looked at me, he asked only one question. Did you inspect Valve 7? I wasn't assigned. Please answer yes or no. No. His pen moved. Manager Wei lowered his head as though disappointed. I wish you'd been more responsible. My hands clenched beneath the blanket. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I finally understood. They didn't need facts. They only needed someone without power. After they left, silence settled over the room. I closed my eyes. Old Shin's voice drifted through memory. When bolts break, don't blame the wrench. Ask who ignored the rust. Someone knocked gently. A woman entered carrying flowers. She looked pale. Bruises covered one side of her face. Lin Sinny. Alive. She stopped beside my bed. You saved me. I smiled faintly. So they tell me. She looked at me for a long moment. They're lying about you. I said nothing. She continued. I remember who locked the emergency valve. My heartbeat slowed. It wasn't you. Outside the room, footsteps approached. Someone stopped at the door. Listening. Lynn noticed it too. She lowered her voice. My grandfather wants to meet you. I frowned. What? Her expression changed. Not gratitude. Recognition. As soon as he heard what happened in the factory. She looked directly into my eyes. He said the healing art described in our family's oldest records had finally returned. My pulse stopped for a single heartbeat. Healing art. Before I could ask another question, the lights in the hospital room flickered. The old whisper returned. Only one sentence. You have inherited what history tried to bury. The light steadied. The whisper disappeared as suddenly as it had come, leaving only the steady rhythm of the heart monitor beside my bed. Beep, beep, beep. For a long moment, neither Lin Sinny nor I spoke. I searched her face for any sign that she had heard the same voice. She hadn't. Her expression carried only exhaustion, gratitude, and something else I couldn't identify. Respect. That unsettled me more than the whisper. People looked at mechanics when they needed something repaired. They rarely looked at us with respect. You don't believe me, she said quietly. I don't know what to believe. She nodded as though she had expected that answer. My grandfather spent 60 years studying medical history. I thought your company made surgical equipment. It does. But our family existed long before the company. She hesitated. There are things my grandfather never discusses outside the family. Before I could respond, the hospital door opened. Manager Wei stepped inside again. His smile appeared first. His eyes never joined it. Miss Lin. She turned. You should be resting. So should you. His voice remained pleasant, but the air in the room became noticeably colder. The investigators will need everyone's cooperation. They'll have mine. I'm relieved. His gaze shifted toward me. Mr. June's memory seems confused after the explosion. I met his eyes. My memory is clear. He smiled wider. Head injuries can be deceptive. Lynn folded her arms. He dragged me out. No one questions his courage. Manager Wei took another step into the room. But courage doesn't erase negligence. I watched him carefully. Not his face. His hands. Old Shun had taught me that mechanics could read people by their hands. A confident liar kept his palms relaxed. A frightened liar hid them. Manager Wei's left thumb rubbed against his wedding ring again and again. Tiny circles. Fast. He was afraid. Not of me. Of something I didn't know yet. He wished us both a speedy recovery and left. Only after the door closed did Lynn speak. He came to my room before I woke. I looked at her. He kept asking what I remembered. What did you tell him? The truth. And he smiled. She paused. Then he reminded me that trauma causes false memories. Neither of us laughed. That evening a doctor informed me I would remain under observation. No visitors after 9. No unnecessary movement. My leg would heal. It should have been comforting. Instead, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt warmth gathering in my palms again. I lifted my right hand. Normal. Dirty fingernails. Grease stains that surgery hadn't completely removed. Nothing extraordinary. Yet when I focused, a faint current moved beneath my skin, like water flowing through hidden pipes. I pressed 2 fingers against the bruises covering my forearm. Warmth spread. The ache lessened. I pulled my hand away immediately. The pain slowly returned. My breathing became uneven. No, that wasn't possible. I tried again. The warmth returned. Not imagined. Real. A knock interrupted my thoughts. An elderly man entered without waiting for permission. He wore simple gray clothes instead of an expensive suit. Silver hair. Straight posture. Sharp eyes. He looked less like a businessman than a retired professor. Behind him stood Lin Sinny. Grandfather. The old man ignored the chair. Instead, he walked directly to my bedside. Then, to my complete surprise, he bowed. Deeply. I instinctively tried to sit up. Please don't. He straightened slowly. My name is Lin Goen. No introductions. His voice was gentle. You've already introduced yourself through your actions. I had no idea what that meant. He looked toward my hands. May I? Confused, I nodded. He carefully lifted my right hand. His fingers rested against my wrist. His eyes closed. Nearly a full minute passed. When he finally opened them again, they were wet. I was beginning to believe our ancestors had written fairy tales. Lin Sinny looked between us. Grandfather, he whispered almost to himself. The Meridian Restoration Art. The words meant nothing to me. I don't understand. I know. He released my hand. That is why you are in danger. Danger. The words settled heavily between us. I almost laughed. A few hours ago, I had been blamed for a factory explosion. Now an elderly stranger was telling me I possessed a forgotten healing art. If someone else had told me this story yesterday, I would have walked away before they reached the second sentence. You've mistaken me for someone else. I haven't. I repair engines. So did many physicians. I blinked. He smiled faintly. The greatest healers in history understood systems. I don't follow. Engines circulate oil. He pointed toward my chest. Bodies circulate blood. He tapped my forehead. Both fail when pressure is ignored. That comparison, I understood immediately. He noticed. I was right. About what? You don't think like a doctor. He smiled. You think like a mechanic. Old Shin used to tell me every machine whispered before it failed. Most people simply didn't know how to listen. Was the human body any different? The thought arrived naturally. Too naturally. Almost as though it had always existed inside me. Lin Goen watched my expression carefully. It has already begun. What has? The inheritance. I inherited nothing. He looked directly into my eyes. You inherited knowledge. He asked permission to examine my injuries. The doctor reluctantly agreed, after confirming he was a recognized medical researcher. Lin Goen placed 3 fingers lightly above the surgical dressing around my leg. He didn't remove the bandage. He simply closed his eyes. Several seconds later he frowned. Then he looked at me. Your pain. What about it? It should be much worse. I stared. He was right. The pain was there, but distant. manageable, as if something inside you is repairing itself. The room became silent. The doctor laughed politely. The human body is remarkable. Lin Goa nodded. It certainly is. But I noticed something. He wasn't speaking to the doctor. He was speaking to me. After they left, sleep finally came. It wasn't peaceful. I found myself standing inside an endless courtyard. Ancient stone, still water. Rows of lanterns stretched into darkness. An old man sat beneath a pine tree. Unlike the whispering voice, he looked completely real. White robes, long silver hair, calm eyes. He poured tea into 2 cups. I wondered when you would arrive. I remained where I was. This is a dream. Yes. You aren't real. No. Then why are we talking? He smiled. Because dreams are sometimes the only place memory survives. I looked around. I don't know you. You know what I left behind? I don't. You heal the girl. I don't know how. You will. The old man lifted one of the teacups. The art chooses character before talent. I frowned. What art? He looked toward the distant lanterns. The Meridian Restoration art. The same words Lin Goen had spoken. My chest tightened. Who are you? A physician. Name. He shook his head. Names become arguments. Then what am I supposed to call you? Teacher. I never agreed to become your student. No. He smiled. The fire did. A cold wind crossed the courtyard. The lantern flames bent together. The old physician spoke one final sentence before everything dissolved. Remember, the first duty of healing is never to become owned by those who seek power. I woke before dawn. My pillow was damp with sweat. Yet one thing remained perfectly clear. Not the dream. Not the old man. Not even his face. My hands. Without thinking, they had formed an unfamiliar sequence of movements while I slept. And somehow, I already knew what the first movement meant. Feel before you fix. Olchin had said nearly the same thing about broken engines. I stared at my palms until sunrise. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of being blamed. I was afraid of what I might truly be becoming. The people who reach for power often mistake healing for something they can possess. That morning, a detective arrived carrying a sealed evidence bag. Inside it was the maintenance log bearing my forged signature, and someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to make sure it looked authentic. The detective placed the evidence bag on my blanket without saying a word. Inside was the maintenance log. The signature at the bottom belonged to me, or at least it looked like it did. For several seconds, I simply stared at it. There are few things stranger than seeing your own name used against you. Do you recognize it? The detective asked. I recognized the handwriting. His pen paused over the notebook. So, you admit you signed it? No. He frowned. I said I recognize it. I picked up the plastic evidence bag carefully. Olchin had taught me that every mechanic developed tiny habits. Some tightened bolts from left to right. Others always underlined numbers on repair orders. Those habits became invisible to the person writing them, but obvious to anyone who had watched for years. I signed my name the same way every time. The J always leaned slightly forward. The forged signature leaned backward. Barely. Almost perfectly. Almost. I slid the bag back across the bed. It isn't mine. The detective looked unconvinced. It matches your employment file. It matches because someone copied it. That's a serious accusation. So, is blaming me for an explosion. Silence settled between us. He finally asked, "Can you prove it's forged?" No. He closed the notebook. Then we're at a difficult point. No. I said quietly. We're at an honest one. He studied me for a long moment before leaving with the evidence. I noticed something as he reached the door. He didn't tell me I was lying. He simply hadn't decided whom to believe. That was enough. Later that afternoon, the hospital television replayed the same news conference. Manager Wei stood before a wall of microphones wearing a black arm sling and an expression carefully measured to look tired but responsible. The company is cooperating fully with investigators. Flash. 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 Our thoughts remain with the injured workers. Another flash. We will not hide from accountability. He never once mentioned my name. He didn't need to. The news anchor did it for him. A maintenance technician is currently assisting police with the investigation. I muted the television. For years, I had believed truth protected itself. Now I understood something different. Truth needed witnesses. Lies only needed confidence. Lin Sinny arrived just before sunset. She carried no flowers this time, only a thin folder. My grandfather asked me to bring these. Inside were photocopies of ancient handwritten pages. They weren't prescriptions. They were diagrams. Human figures covered in delicate lines that crossed through the chest, arms, neck, and legs. Meridians. Some pages contained notes written in modern Chinese. Others were so old that even Lynn admitted she couldn't read them. My grandfather translated what he could. I looked at one sentence. A physician must first quiet his own heart before touching another's pulse. Another page contained a warning. Power seeks healing for control. Compassion seeks healing for life. The words from my dream echoed in my mind. The first duty of healing is never to become owned by those who seek power. I looked up. I dreamed those words. Lynn's expression changed. You started remembering. I've never learned any of this. Exactly. Neither of us spoke for a while. Finally, she asked, "Will you meet my grandfather after you're discharged?" I hesitated. Why me? Because he believes the art chose you. I don't. You don't have to. She smiled faintly. He says belief usually arrives last. That night, I tested the warmth in my hands again. Not on another person. On myself. I rested my palm over the deep bruise beneath my ribs. Nothing happened at first. Then came the now familiar sensation. Gentle warmth. Not heat. Not electricity. Something alive. The pain eased. Not completely. Just enough to let me breathe comfortably. When I removed my hand, the relief remained. I sat in silence for several minutes. This wasn't magic. At least it didn't feel like magic. It felt natural, as though my body remembered instructions my mind had forgotten. The following morning, the company sent representatives. Not lawyers. Human resources. 3 people in matching suits. Their smiles disappeared the moment they closed the hospital room door. The oldest placed a document on the table. "If you sign this," she said, "the company will provide financial assistance during the investigation." I didn't touch the paper. What does it say? Only that you accept temporary administrative responsibility while the investigation continues. Administrative responsibility. A standard procedure. I read the first paragraph. Halfway down the second page, the real purpose appeared. The employee acknowledged failure to follow established safety procedures. I looked up. You want a confession? No. A resolution. I pushed the document back. I'm not signing it. The youngest representative leaned forward. "Mr. June, this is the easiest path." "For whom?" No one answered. "We're trying to help you." "No." I met each of their eyes in turn. "You're trying to help the company." The oldest woman sighed. "You have no legal education." "No." "No family." I remained silent. "No financial resources." Still silent. She folded the unsigned papers. "Please think carefully." "I already have." As they reached the door, I spoke again. "I won't rescue people who are trying to drown me." They left without another word. When the room became quiet again, I felt something unexpected. Not anger. Relief. For years, I had apologized whenever customers blamed me for problems I hadn't caused. I repaired extra damage for free. Worked late without pay. Cover mistakes that belonged to supervisors because I believed keeping peace mattered more than being right. The explosion had taken many things from me. One thing it had given back was the ability to say no. Old Chin used to laugh whenever I accepted impossible jobs. "You keep fixing other people's laziness. I need the money." "No." He would shake his head. "You think making life easier for careless people makes you kind." I finally understood what he meant. Every act of rescue teaches someone they never need to save themselves. I whispered the words aloud. They settled quietly inside me. This time, I would not carry everyone else's mistakes. The next morning, rain traced thin lines down the hospital windows. I stood beside the glass with the aid of crutch, watching people hurry across the courtyard. Doctors, nurses, delivery drivers, worried families. Everyone carried a destination. For the first time since the explosion, I realized I didn't know where mine was anymore. The factory wouldn't take me back. Even if they did, I couldn't return. Not because I hated the place. Because I had finally seen what happened to people who spent their lives protecting institutions that would never protect them. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Lin Goen entered alone. He carried an old wooden box no larger than a toolbox. Unlike the polished equipment used throughout the hospital, this box showed decades of wear. Its brass corners had darkened with age, and the wood carried countless tiny scratches. It reminded me of old Chin's toolbox. A box became trustworthy only after surviving enough years. Lin Goen placed it on the table. "I'd like to show you something." He slowly opened the lid. Inside rested dozens of slender silver needles. Each sat in its own groove. Each looked handmade. "They're older than my grandfather's grandfather," he said. "I've never seen needles stored like that." Because these were never ordinary medical instruments. I looked at him. They belonged to the last recognized practitioner of the meridian restoration art. I felt the familiar warmth gather beneath my palms. Not because I touched the box, because I looked at it. The sensation startled me enough that I instinctively stepped back. Lin Goen noticed. "You felt it." "I don't know what I felt." He nodded calmly. "You don't need to name it yet." He lifted one needle carefully. "I'm not asking you to perform medicine. I wouldn't even know where to begin." "I know." He smiled gently. "I'm asking you to observe." He extended the needle toward me. The moment my fingers closed around it, images flashed across my mind. Not complete memories. Fragments. Hands steadier than mine. An elderly physician kneeling beside a wounded soldier. A child crying with fever. A woman smiling through tears after opening her eyes. None of the faces were familiar. Yet the emotions were. Compassion. Patience. Responsibility. The images vanished as quickly as they had appeared. The needle slipped from my fingers and landed softly on the blanket. My breathing became uneven. What was that? Memory. It wasn't mine. "No." Lin Goen closed the wooden box. "But it belongs to the inheritance you carry." Before I could ask another question, hurried footsteps echoed outside. A nurse burst into the room. "Professor Lin." "What happened?" "We have a patient in cardiac distress." She looked embarrassed. "The family specifically requested you." Lin Goen glanced at me. "Come with me." "I shouldn't." "You won't treat anyone." He paused. "You'll only watch." The emergency room overflowed with tension. Doctors moved quickly around an elderly man whose breathing had become dangerously shallow. Monitors beeped in uneven rhythms. His daughter stood against the wall, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had turned white. One physician looked up. "Professor Lin, the medication isn't stabilizing him." Lin Goen approached quietly. He didn't push anyone aside. He simply observed. For nearly a full minute, he said nothing. His calm spread through the room in a way I couldn't explain. Finally, he asked for the patient's wrist. He closed his eyes. The room fell silent. Then he frowned. "Not the heart." The attending physician blinked. "What?" "The heart is reacting." He pointed gently toward the patient's upper abdomen. "The problem began here." The doctor hesitated. Another physician quickly reviewed the scans already displayed on the monitor. A moment later, her expression changed. "Wait." She enlarged one image. "There. A hidden internal hemorrhage. Small, easy to miss, but enough to trigger everything else." The room erupted into controlled motion. The patient was rushed towards surgery. The daughter broke into tears. "Thank you." Lin Goen simply bowed his head. As everyone hurried away, he turned toward me. "What did you see?" "I don't know." "Yes, you do." I thought carefully. "You never rushed." He smiled. "What else?" "You weren't trying to prove you were the smartest person in the room." His smile widened. "And you listened before you acted." He nodded. A mechanic who replaces parts without diagnosing the engine creates more damage. His eyes met mine. A physician who treats symptoms without understanding the body does the same. Old Chen's lessons. The physician's teachings. Different worlds. The same truth. As we walked back toward my room, Lin Goen stopped beneath a covered walkway overlooking the hospital garden. Rain tapped softly against the roof. "For many years," he said, "wealthy families search for stories like yours." Stories. They believe the meridian restoration art can extend life indefinitely. Can it? No. His answer came without hesitation. It can preserve health. It cannot defeat death. Yet people hear only what they want. He looked toward the rain. Powerful people fear losing power. They mistake healing for immortality. I remained silent. "They will come looking for you." "I don't want any part of that." "I know." He turned toward me. "Which is exactly why you're worthy of carrying it." That evening, Detective Zhao returned. This time, he wasn't alone. Another investigator accompanied him, carrying a cardboard archive box. We recovered additional evidence from the factory. He placed several maintenance files on the table. We also interviewed more employees. I waited. 3 workers confirmed that Valve 7 wasn't assigned to you. I said nothing. But there it was. They're afraid to testify formally, because they'll lose their jobs. He nodded once. I leaned back against the bed. They're making the same choice I would have made a month ago. You understand them? I do. And that doesn't make it less painful. Detective Zhao studied me carefully. I expected you to be angry. I was. Were. I've spent years fixing other people's mistakes. I looked toward the rain outside. I'm tired. Tired enough to give up? No. Tired enough to stop carrying people who refuse to stand on their own. The detective slowly closed the file. For the first time, he looked at me not as a suspect, but as someone trying to survive something much larger than a criminal investigation. Just before leaving, he paused at the doorway. Mr. June. Yes. The surveillance server. My heartbeat slowed. What about it? It wasn't destroyed in the explosion. I stared at him. It disappeared. He met my eyes. Before the fire started, the room became completely silent. Someone hadn't simply covered up an accident. Someone had planned for the explosion long before the first spark. The detective's words stayed with me long after he left. The surveillance server disappeared before the fire started. That single sentence changed everything. Until then, I had believed the explosion had been followed by a cover-up. Now another possibility stood before me. The cover-up might have begun before the explosion ever happened. Sleep refused to come. The hospital corridor had grown quiet, broken only by distant footsteps and the occasional rolling cart. I sat upright in bed, replaying every hour of my last shift at the factory. I wasn't trying to remember dramatic moments. Old Chin had taught me that disasters rarely announce themselves. They whispered. A missing bolt, a strange vibration, an unfamiliar smell. People ignored whispers until they became explosions. I closed my eyes. The morning before the accident, the pressure gauges had been normal. The maintenance schedule had been ordinary. Lunch had arrived late because one delivery truck broke down. Nothing unusual. Then, a memory surfaced. Not the explosion. A conversation. Manager Wei had entered the maintenance room earlier than usual. He wasn't alone. A man in an expensive charcoal suit stood beside him. The visitor didn't wear a company badge. He never introduced himself. At the time, I hadn't paid attention. Visitors came and went from corporate headquarters every week. But now, I remembered one sentence. Manager Wei had said, quietly, "Everything will be finished today." The suited man replied, "It has to be." At the time, I assumed they were discussing production deadlines. Now, I wasn't so sure. The following morning, I told Detective Zhao everything I remembered. He wrote every word carefully. Can you describe the visitor? Late 40s. Height, a little taller than me. Anything distinctive? I hesitated. Then another memory surfaced. A watch. A watch. It wasn't expensive because of diamonds. The detective looked confused. It was old. What makes you remember it? It had been repaired. He blinked. The leather strap had newer stitching than the rest. He looked at me for several seconds. You noticed that? I'm a mechanic. I smiled faintly. I noticed repairs. For the first time since we'd met. Detective Zhao smiled back. That's surprisingly useful. After he left, Lin Sinny walked into my room, carrying breakfast. She noticed my expression immediately. You remembered something. I think I did. She placed the food on the table. My grandfather says memories don't always return in order. They don't. I looked at the rice porridge, but didn't touch it. I keep remembering tiny things. Tiny things solve large mysteries. Her words reminded me of tightening engine bolts. One loose screw could destroy an entire transmission. Small things mattered. Always. That afternoon, my doctor finally approved short walks through the rehabilitation garden. The crutch still supported most of my weight, but each step hurt less than the last. The hospital garden wasn't large. A few stone paths, a koi pond, several old ginkgo trees. Patients walked slowly beneath them, while family members spoke in hushed voices. I found an empty bench near the water. For several minutes, I simply listened. Wind, birds, water. No engines. No shouting supervisors. No grinding machinery. The silence felt unfamiliar. Then I heard an argument. We're offering enough money. A man in a tailored suit stood several meters away, speaking sharply into his phone. I don't care if he refuses. Pause. No. Another pause. Increase the settlement. He lowered his voice. He signs today. He ended the call and turned. Our eyes met for only a second. Recognition flashed across his face. Not because he knew me personally, because he recognized the bandages, the hospital bracelet, the survivor. His expression changed almost instantly. Professional. Polite. He nodded. Recover well. Then he walked away. Too quickly. Something inside me tightened. Not fear. Instinct. I had seen that face before. Not clearly. Only for a moment. Smoke. Factory floor. Manager way. The expensive watch. The same man. I didn't chase him. A month ago I probably would have. I would have demanded answers. Forced a confrontation. Instead, I memorized the way he walked. Slight limp in the left leg. The repaired leather watch. Dark blue tie with silver stitching. People trying to hide often revealed themselves by believing no one was observing them. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is nothing. I let him leave. That evening, Lynn Goen listened quietly as I described the encounter. You did the right thing. I let him go. You let him become comfortable. I frowned. I don't understand. People reveal themselves when they believe they are safe. He poured tea into 2 small cups. If you had confronted him, he would become careful. Exactly. He slid 1 cup toward me. The art you've inherited isn't only about healing. It isn't. It begins with observation. He smiled. The body tells the truth before the mouth does. I lifted the teacup. So do people. His eyes brightened. You learn quickly. No. I looked into the tea. I've always observed. I just never realized observation had value. Later that night, Lynn Goen unlocked another drawer inside the old wooden box. Hidden beneath the silver needles rested a thin notebook wrapped in faded cloth. Its pages had yellowed with age. Unlike the diagrams I'd seen before, this one contained handwritten case records. Patients. Symptoms. Treatments. Successes. Failures. The final page was different. Only 1 paragraph had been written. If these records reach another generation, remember this above all else. Never heal for those who believe life can be purchased. Healing offered to greed becomes another form of suffering. No signature. Only a crimson seal. I traced the faded ink gently. I stopped. What? I've seen this handwriting before. Lynn Goen stared at me. You couldn't have. I know. But I recognized it before I understood why. The warmth returned beneath my fingertips. Not stronger. Simply familiar. As though the notebook itself approved of being opened again. The next morning the news channels exploded with fresh headlines. Factory investigation expands. Corporate safety documents under review. No names. No arrests. But public attention had begun shifting. For the first time, the company wasn't controlling the entire story. I muted the television. My phone vibrated. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. A man's nervous voice whispered, "Don't say my name." I'm listening. I worked maintenance. My pulse quickened. I know who replaced your safety logs. I stood despite the pain in my leg. Where are you? I'm outside the hospital. Come inside. I can't. What? Silence. Then, because they're watching the entrance. The call disconnected. I hurried toward the window, overlooking the main gate. Crowds moved through the entrance. Visitors. Doctors. Delivery vans. Then I saw it. Across the street. A black sedan sat with its engine running. Inside, 2 men watched the hospital. One of them wore a charcoal suit. And on his wrist, the repaired leather watch caught the afternoon sunlight. Someone wasn't waiting for me to recover. Someone was waiting to make sure I never spoke. The black sedan remained across the street for nearly an hour. It never approached the hospital. It never left. It simply waited. I watched from the 5th-floor window until my injured leg began to ache again. A month ago, I would have convinced myself I was imagining things. Now I trusted what I observed more than what people said. The man with the repaired watch wasn't there by accident. Neither was the car. Someone wanted to know whether I would meet the witness who had called me. They weren't protecting the truth. They were protecting whoever feared it. I called Detective Zhao immediately. I think your witness was followed. His voice sharpened. What happened? I described the sedan, the 2 men inside, and the familiar watch. He asked only practical questions. License plate. I couldn't see it clearly. Did they enter the hospital? No. Stay where you are. I'm not planning to leave. There was a pause. Then he said quietly, "That's probably the smartest decision you've made." An hour later, Detective Zhao arrived through a staff entrance instead of the main lobby. He looked tired. Not physically. Mentally. He closed the blinds before speaking. The man who called you. My heartbeat slowed. We found him. And he was assaulted. The room fell silent. Is he alive? Yes. Barely. I sat down slowly. He placed a photograph on the table. A narrow alley. An overturned motorcycle. Blood on wet pavement. They wanted his phone. Did they get it? No. He destroyed it before they reached him. I closed my eyes. One witness had nearly died simply for trying to speak. The truth had become expensive. I have a question, Detective Zhao said. I nodded. Why haven't you gone to the media? The answer came surprisingly easily. Because I don't want attention. They'd make you a hero. I don't want that either. He studied me carefully. Then what do you want? I looked toward the rain outside. I want the people responsible to lose the protection they've built around themselves. You don't sound interested in revenge. I'm not. I thought of Old Shun, of Lin Goen, of the unknown physician from my dreams. I'm interested in consequences. The detective remained silent. Then, for the first time, he extended his hand. I'm Zhao Ming. Not Detective Zhao. Just Zhao Ming. I shook it. I'm June. It felt less like the beginning of an investigation, and more like the beginning of trust. Later that evening, Lin Goen entered carrying 2 paper bags filled with simple takeout food. No hospital meals tonight. I smiled. I wasn't going to complain. You wouldn't. He handed me a bowl of noodles. But your face already did. For several quiet minutes we ate without discussing investigations, conspiracies, or ancient healing arts. The silence felt healthy. Finally he spoke. Do you know why the old physicians planted gardens beside their clinics? So patients could relax? Partly. He looked toward the window. They needed somewhere to remember they couldn't save everyone. I lowered my chopsticks. He continued. A doctor who believes every death is a personal failure eventually becomes dangerous. Why? Because desperation makes people arrogant. He met my eyes. They stopped listening. The words settled deeply inside me. I realized they applied far beyond medicine. For years I had believed every broken relationship, every workplace conflict, every angry customer was somehow my responsibility to fix. When those efforts failed, I blamed myself. Now I understood. Not every collapse belonged to the person who witnessed it. The following morning, I was discharged. The hospital corridor felt strangely unfamiliar as I walked toward the exit with a single backpack slung over my shoulder. Everything I owned fit inside it. A few clothes, old Chen's wrench, some savings, nothing else. No home waited for me. The room I rented above the repair shop had been sealed as part of the investigation. Lin Sinny stood beside the entrance. My grandfather insists you stay with us. I can't. You can. I don't want to become a burden. She smiled gently. My grandfather said you'd answer exactly like that. I sighed. He also said to remind you. She pulled a folded note from her pocket. I recognized the handwriting immediately. People who have carried too much often mistake kindness for debt. I looked up. He's difficult to argue with. He has 90 years of practice. Despite everything. I laughed. It was the first genuine laugh since the explosion. The Lin residence surprised me. I expected marble floors, luxury cars, and impossible wealth. Instead, the estate sat behind old stone walls covered in ivy. Elegant. Quiet. The largest building wasn't the mansion. It was the library. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling. Medical texts, engineering books, history, philosophy, even collections on mechanical design. I stopped before a shelf filled with antique repair manuals. Lin Goen noticed. I wonder how long it would take you to find those. You collect these. I study systems. He smiled. The human body wasn't the first machine people try to understand. Over the next several days, my routine changed completely. Morning rehabilitation exercises. Breakfast with Lin Goen. Hours in the library. No formal lessons. No mystical ceremonies. Instead, he asked questions. If an engine overheats, what do inexperienced mechanics usually do? They replace parts. And experienced ones? They ask why it overheated. He nodded. The body deserves the same respect. Every lesson returned to observation. Never assumption. Never pride. Never haste. The Meridian Restoration, art wasn't teaching me supernatural power. It was reshaping the way I thought. One afternoon, while organizing old manuscripts, I found a folded letter hidden inside a damaged book. The paper was newer than everything else in the library. Only 20 years old. Not ancient. Not historical. Addressed simply, to whoever inherits the art. I hesitated. Lin Goen saw the envelope in my hand. His expression changed. I've searched for that letter for years. You've never read it? No. Why? Because it wasn't written for me. He nodded toward the seal. It seems it has finally found the correct reader. With careful fingers, I opened the envelope. Inside was only a single handwritten page. If you are reading this, the world around you has probably already discovered your existence. Do not fear obscurity. Fear becoming useful to the wrong people. There will come a day when a family offers everything you have ever lacked: wealth, status, protection, respect. If they ask for your loyalty before they ask about your conscience, leave. No signature. Only the same crimson seal. I stared at the final sentence for a long time. It felt less like advice, and more like a warning left specifically for me. That evening, Zhao Ming arrived unexpectedly. His expression was unusually serious. I have news. Lin Sinny quietly left the room. Zhao placed a sealed investigation folder on the table. The man with the repaired watch. I leaned forward. We identified him. My pulse quickened. He isn't part of the factory. Then who is he? Zhao opened the file. A photograph stared back at me. The expensive suit. The repaired leather watch. The calm expression. My name for him was wrong. Zhao looked directly into my eyes. He isn't a visitor. He sits on the board of the corporation that secretly owns the factory. I frowned. I've never heard of him. Very few people have. He turned another page. Officially. The detective paused. His name doesn't appear anywhere in the company's public records. I looked at the hidden ownership chart. Then at Zhao. This wasn't an accident, was it? He slowly shook his head. No. The room became completely silent. The explosion. He took a slow breath. May have been planned to erase something far more valuable than financial records. For several minutes after Zhao Ming spoke, no one in the library said a word. The grandfather clock in the corner continued its steady rhythm. Tick, tick, tick. It sounded strangely loud. The explosion wasn't about insurance, Zhao finally said. It wasn't about negligence. He slid another document across the table. It was about research. I looked down. The file contained engineering diagrams from the factory's medical equipment division. Most of it meant little to me. One page didn't. It showed a prototype life support circulation system. Pumps, pressure regulators, flow control valves. I recognized the layout instantly. It had been built using the same pressure management principles I'd learned repairing industrial hydraulic systems. They copied this design. I murmured. Zhao looked up. What? I traced one of the diagrams with my finger. This valve arrangement doesn't belong to medical engineering. It doesn't. It belongs to heavy industrial equipment. Lin Goen leaned closer. Can you explain? I nodded slowly. Someone adapted factory pressure technology for medical devices. He looked at me for a long moment before smiling faintly. That explains why you noticed details others missed. Different machines. Same language. Pressure. Balance. Failure. Suddenly, the explosion looked different. If someone wanted those research records to disappear, destroying the factory would erase more than evidence. It would erase years of work. Zhao opened another folder. We recovered fragments from the damaged server room. He placed several printed emails on the table. Most had been corrupted. Only isolated sentences remained readable. Transfer before inspection. Board approval unnecessary. Destroy physical archive. No signatures. No names. Only fragments. But fragments were enough. Someone inside the company had planned to move sensitive material before regulators arrived. The explosion hadn't protected secrets. It had erased them. Or at least, someone believed it had. I think they made one mistake, I said. Both men looked at me. What mistake? They assumed every copy was inside the factory. Zhao frowned. You think there are duplicates? I don't know. But engineers rarely keep only one version. Lin Goen smiled quietly. A mechanic's mind. I looked at him. If I designed something important, you'd test it. I'd also keep records. Somewhere safe. Exactly. That afternoon, Zhao arranged a formal meeting with the National Investigation Team. He asked if I would attend. Months ago, I would have refused. I disliked government offices. I disliked attention even more. This time I accepted. Not because I wanted recognition, because silence no longer protected innocent people. The conference room felt colder than any hospital ward. Long table. White walls. No decorations. Only files. Investigators filled both sides of the room. At the far end sat executives from the corporation. Manager Wei was among them. His confident smile disappeared the instant he saw me. The man with the repaired watch sat 2 seats away. For the first time, he knew I recognized him. He never looked away. Neither did I. The lead investigator began calmly. We'll review inconsistencies in the maintenance records. Manager Wei answered every question smoothly. Too smoothly. Months of preparation showed in every sentence. Every answer sounded rehearsed. Then my forged signature appeared on the screen. The investigator turned toward me. Mr. June, is this your signature? I stood, walked slowly toward the projector, and picked up a marker. I'd like permission to use the board. The room exchanged confused glances. Permission was granted. I drew 2 signatures. Mine, the forged version. Then I circled a single stroke. My hand always moves forward here. I demonstrated naturally. The forged signature hesitates. I drew it again. Whoever copied it watched the finished result. I tapped the board. They didn't understand how the motion was made. Silence. The handwriting specialist, sitting near the window, slowly adjusted his glasses. May I examine that? He compared both examples carefully. Several minutes passed. Finally, he nodded. The stroke sequence is different. Manager Wei's face paled. It deserves forensic review. The atmosphere inside the room changed instantly. Truth does not arrive dramatically. It arrives quietly, then refuses to leave. The investigators requested additional writing samples. Employment forms. Maintenance requests. Personal notes. Everything matched my natural writing, not the forged document. Manager Wei's lawyer immediately objected. This proves nothing. No, Zhao replied calmly. It proves the investigation isn't finished. The difference mattered. The next witness entered. One of the maintenance workers. The same man who had been too frightened to testify earlier. His hands trembled. He avoided looking toward the executives. The investigator spoke gently. You are under legal protection. The worker swallowed hard. He looked at me. I didn't nod. Didn't encourage him. Didn't pressure him. This choice had to belong to him. Finally he spoke. Val 7 wasn't assigned to June. The room became silent. It was reassigned. By whom? His lips trembled. Manager Wei. Wei's lawyer stood immediately. Objection. The investigator ignored him. When? The morning of the explosion. Another maintenance worker requested permission to testify. Then another. Fear had begun breaking apart. Not because I fought anyone. Because someone else had finally stepped forward first. Courage spread quietly. The man with the repaired watch remained perfectly calm. Too calm. He whispered something to the lawyer beside him. Then, unexpectedly, he stood. My name is Liang Zhang. The room turned toward him. I believe this investigation has become unnecessarily emotional. His voice carried effortless authority. Our corporation has already compensated the victims. He glanced briefly toward me. We should focus on rebuilding. I met his eyes. No. The single word echoed more loudly than I expected. He smiled politely. And why not? Because rebuilding on top of lies only creates larger ruins. Neither of us raised our voices. Neither of us needed to. The lead investigator requested one final item. Recovered server fragments. A forensic technician connected a damaged storage device to the projector. Most files remained unreadable. Then, one video appeared. Grainy. Incomplete. Recorded only hours before the explosion. The factory corridor. Timestamp visible. Manager Wei. Liang Zhang. Standing together. Audio barely survived. But one sentence came through clearly. Liang Zhang looked directly at Manager Wei and said, Once the archive is gone, no one can trace the transfers. The room froze. Manager Wei's face turned white. His lawyer slowly lowered his pen. No one spoke. No one had to. The evidence finally spoke for itself. Truth does not create damage. It reveals where damage already exists. Security officers quietly enter the conference room. No dramatic arrests. No shouting. No handcuffs. Not yet. The investigators simply informed both men that neither was permitted to leave while the inquiry expanded. Manager Wei looked toward me. His expression carried anger, confusion, disbelief. You ruined everything. I shook my head. No. I picked up my cane. You did. Then I turned and walked out of the room. For the first time since the factory exploded, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt free, because I had finally stopped carrying responsibility for another man's choices. Outside the government building, Zhao Ming caught up with me. We've frozen corporate records. He smiled for the first time. And accounting just discovered something much bigger. I stopped walking. What? He handed me a sealed envelope. The money. He looked directly into my eyes. Was never the real motive. The envelope felt heavier than paper should. Zhao Ming waited while I opened it. Inside were accounting reports, property transfers, and handwritten notes recovered from an encrypted company archive. At first glance, they looked like ordinary financial documents. Then I noticed something familiar. Dates. Every suspicious transfer happened within 48 hours of a workplace accident. Not only in my factory, at several facilities owned by the same holding company. I looked up. This wasn't the first explosion. Zhao nodded. No, and probably not the last. It would have continued. He folded his hands. If the investigation had stopped with you. A strange calm settled over me. For weeks I had wondered why I survived. Now another question replaced it. What should I do with that survival? The public investigation expanded quickly. Television channels stopped calling the disaster an accident. Reporters stood outside corporate headquarters every morning. Shareholders demanded explanations. Employees who had remained silent for years slowly stepped forward. Not because someone forced them, because fear weakens when it discovers it is no longer alone. I watched most of it from the Lin residence. I gave only one formal statement. No interviews. No speeches. No attempts to become a symbol. The story belonged to everyone who had suffered. Not only me. One afternoon, Zhao visited with unexpected news. Charges have been filed. Against Wei. Against Wei. He paused. And Liang Zhong. I closed the book resting in my lap. What finally broke them? The money. I smiled faintly. I thought you said money wasn't the real motive. It wasn't. He sat opposite me. The financial records only opened the door. What was behind it? He slid another document toward me. Medical research contracts. Government grants. Prototype patents. They weren't stealing machines. He looked at me carefully. They were stealing years of scientific work from smaller laboratories. The explosion had erased the original records. Then the corporation intended to register the inventions under its own name. Greed hadn't stopped at money. It wanted recognition, history, legacy. That evening, Lin Goen poured tea in the garden. The autumn wind carried the scent of pine through the courtyard. I've been thinking, I admitted. That's usually dangerous. I laughed. So I've been told. He waited. I don't want to return to repairing motorcycles. No, but I don't want to become famous for healing either. He nodded slowly. Good. I thought you'd be disappointed. The opposite. He lifted his cup. People who chase reputation eventually begin treating reputation instead of patience. The word stayed with me. After a long silence, he spoke again. Our family clinic has been closed for 12 years. I looked toward him. It needs someone who understands hands. I've never attended medical school. I know. You still want me there? I want you to learn. His eyes rested on mine. Slowly. No shortcuts. No titles. No miracles. Only honest work. The proposal felt strangely familiar. It sounded exactly like the repair shop where old Chun had raised me. The old clinic stood behind the library. Its wooden sign had faded from years of rain. Dust covered nearly every shelf. Cabinets stood empty. The treatment rooms were clean, but forgotten. I walked through each room quietly, running my fingers across worn tables, opening old drawers, examining handmade instruments. Nothing luxurious. Everything practical. This place doesn't feel abandoned, I said. Lin Goen smiled. It was waiting. Our first weeks weren't filled with extraordinary healing. They were filled with cleaning, repairing broken cabinets, replacing cracked windows, organizing decades of handwritten records. I fixed the leaking roof myself. The old habits returned naturally. Measure twice. Repair carefully. Never rush. While replacing loose floorboards, I realized something. Healing buildings wasn't very different from healing people. Neglect accumulated slowly. Restoration demanded patience. One morning, an elderly bicycle courier stopped outside the clinic. He wasn't seriously ill, only exhausted. His knees hurt. His shoulders remained permanently stiff from decades of work. Lin Goen looked toward me. Would you like to begin? I froze. I don't know enough. You know how to listen? The old man sat nervously. I checked his pulse exactly as I'd been taught. Ask questions. Watch the way he stood. The way he breathed. The way he rubbed his right shoulder whenever he turned. The warmth gathered quietly inside my palms. Not because I forced it, because I finally stopped trying to control it. I rested one hand gently near his shoulder. Nothing dramatic happened. No glowing light. No miracle. Only warmth. The old courier blinked. My shoulder. He slowly rotated his arm. It doesn't feel as heavy. Lin Goen smiled without saying a word. After the patient left, I looked down at my hands. I barely did anything. He nodded. Exactly. Healing isn't performance. No, it's presence. For the first time, I truly understood. Weeks became filled with ordinary people. A teacher with chronic migraines. A factory welder whose wrists never fully recovered after years of labor. A widow suffering from persistent insomnia. Some improved quickly. Others required weeks of care. A few couldn't be helped as much as they hoped. Those failures hurt. One evening I apologized to Lin Goen. I should have done more. He shook his head. You did everything honestly. It wasn't enough. It rarely feels like enough. He placed an old notebook beside me. The final page contained a sentence written by the ancient physician. Success belongs to effort. Outcomes belong to life. I closed the notebook slowly. Peace begins when winning stops mattering. The sentence came to me naturally. I finally understood it. Several months into the clinic's reopening, Zhao Ming arrived carrying no investigation files. Only a small wooden plaque. What is this? A gift. He placed it beside the entrance. The carved characters read, Quiet Hands Clinic. I looked at him in surprise. I didn't name it. You never would. He smiled. So everyone else did. Apparently the neighborhood had begun referring to it that way because no advertisements hung outside. No loud promises. No exaggerated claims. People simply came, received help, returned home, then quietly recommended the clinic to others. Trust grew the same way healthy trees did. Slowly. One rainy afternoon, Lin Sinny joined me on the clinic steps after closing. The company offered me an executive position. I looked at her. Did you accept? No. She smiled toward the rain. I accepted responsibility for rebuilding the research division instead. That sounds harder. It is. She glanced toward the waiting room. But after everything we've seen, she smiled. I'd rather build something honest. I nodded. Neither of us needed to say more. Some conversations ended not because words ran out, but because understanding had already arrived. As winter approached, the clinic lights stayed on later each evening. Not because we chased profit, because people trusted the door would remain open. One night, after the final patient left, Lin Goen handed me the old wooden box once more. This time, he didn't keep his hand on it. It belongs with you now. I accepted it carefully. The silver needles rested inside exactly as before, yet they no longer felt mysterious. They felt responsible. Outside, snow began falling softly across the courtyard. Behind us, the clinic's new wooden sign swayed gently in the wind. Ahead lay a quieter life. But I had learned enough to know that quiet did not mean easy. Sometimes, it simply meant you had finally chosen the right path. The first anniversary of the explosion arrived without ceremony. No television cameras waited outside the clinic. No reporters requested interviews. The city had already found newer scandals to discuss. Life always moved forward. Only those who had survived remembered how loudly the past could echo. That morning I unlocked the clinic before sunrise. The courtyard still carried the scent of rain from the night before. I swept the stone path the same way old Shun used to sweep the floor of his repair shop. Slowly, carefully, not because anyone would notice, because work deserved respect, even when no one was watching. When I entered the consultation room, an envelope rested on my desk. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Liang Zheng has requested one meeting before sentencing. He specifically asked for you. No explanation followed. Only the location. The detention center. I folded the letter and slipped it into my pocket. Lin Goen watched quietly from the doorway. You've already decided. I have. Will you go? Yes. He nodded once. Good. He didn't ask why. He understood. Some conversations belonged to endings. The detention center was quieter than I expected. Steel doors. White walls. Simple furniture. Nothing dramatic. Liang Zheng looked older than the last time I'd seen him. Not because prison had changed him. Because certainty had left him. The repaired leather watch was gone. Only the pale outline remained on his wrist. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, he smiled weakly. I imagined this meeting differently. So did I. He looked at the table between us. I wanted to ask you something. I'm listening. Why didn't you destroy me? I frowned. You had every opportunity. I told the truth. You could have gone further. I didn't need to. He studied my face, as though searching for anger. He found none. I blamed you for everything. I know. I tried to silence witnesses. I know. I would have let you spend your life in prison. I know. His voice became almost a whisper. Why aren't you angry? I took a slow breath before answering. Because anger would have kept me standing beside the explosion forever. Silence filled the room. I chose to walk away instead. He lowered his head. For the first time, he looked like a man. Not a powerful executive. Not a strategist. Simply a tired human being facing the weight of his own decisions. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not here to give it. He looked up. I'm here because carrying hatred would make me resemble the people who created all of this. His eyes closed. I understand. I'm not sure you do. He accepted that answer without argument. When I stood to leave, he spoke one last time. The research archive. I stopped. There was another copy. I turned. Where? He gave me the address of a forgotten warehouse on the edge of the city. It survived. Then he looked away. I never had the courage to destroy it. That was the last time I ever saw Yang Zheng. Several days later, Zhao Ming obtained a legal warrant for the warehouse. The building looked abandoned. Dust covered everything. Broken windows allowed thin beams of afternoon light to fall across old filing cabinets. Engineers carefully opened sealed storage containers. Inside rested the missing research. Thousands of handwritten notes. Prototype designs. Clinical observations. Years of honest scientific work that had almost vanished forever. The lead investigator looked toward me. You were right. I shook my head. I only guessed. No. He smiled. You understood the people who built it. The recovered research was returned to the original laboratories. Small companies received recognition that had been stolen from them. Young engineers finally saw their mentors credited for inventions the world believed had disappeared. Justice didn't erase the past, but it restored the future. Months later, the trial concluded. Manager Wei accepted responsibility only after overwhelming evidence left no room for denial. Liang Zheng admitted directing the destruction of records. Neither dramatic speeches nor emotional confessions filled the courtroom. Only facts. Sometimes facts were enough. When reporters waited outside hoping for comments, I quietly left through a side entrance. The story no longer belonged to me. It belonged to everyone who would work in safer factories because the truth had finally been heard. The clinic continued growing, not into a famous institution, into a trusted one. Patients traveled from nearby towns because someone they respected had quietly recommended us. No advertisements, no exaggerated promises, only steady work. One afternoon, a young mechanic arrived carrying a dented toolbox. His hands were stained with grease. His left wrist had swollen after years of repetitive work. As I examined him, I couldn't help smiling. You repair motorcycles? He looked surprised. How did you know? I pointed toward the small burn mark on his sleeve. Only mechanics ignore burns until someone else notices. He laughed. So that's obvious. To another mechanic. During his treatment, he admitted something that felt painfully familiar. I don't really have anyone. Neither had I. Years earlier, those words would have opened an old wound inside me. Now they opened a door instead. After the appointment ended, I handed him a business card. If your wrist keeps bothering you. I paused. Come back. He nodded gratefully. Then I added, and if you're looking for honest work. I gestured toward the old workshop behind the clinic. We always need someone who knows how to repair things. He stared at me. You'd hire me? If you work honestly. His smile answered before his voice did. For a brief moment, I saw myself years ago. An orphan standing outside a repair shop, waiting for someone to choose him. This time, someone did. That evening I visited Old Chen's grave. The hillside overlooked the city. The wind carried distant sounds of traffic and life. I placed a small wrench beside the headstone, not as an offering, as a promise fulfilled. You were right. I said quietly. The best mechanics don't only repair machines. They repair trust. The words disappeared into the evening air. Yet somehow, I believed he heard them. As autumn returned, Lin Goen grew noticeably weaker. Age had finally begun collecting its quiet debts. One afternoon we sat together beneath the ginkgo tree inside the courtyard. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally he smiled. Do you remember what you asked me in the hospital? I nodded. Why me? And now? I looked toward the clinic where patients quietly entered and left. Children laughed near the gate. The young mechanic adjusted the sign outside before opening the workshop. Lin Sinny discussed new medical research with visiting engineers. Everything felt peaceful. I don't ask that question anymore. He smiled. Good. After another silence, he spoke his final lesson. A legacy isn't preserved because someone protects it. He looked toward my hands. It's preserved because someone lives it. I bowed my head. No further explanation was necessary. Winter arrived gently. Snow rested across the clinic roof. The wooden sign creaked softly in the cold wind. Before opening each morning, I still swept the stone path. Not because it needed sweeping, because beginnings mattered. Sometimes patients asked where I had learned medicine. I always answered the same way. I learned to listen before I learned to heal. Most smiled politely without understanding. That was all right. Not every truth required explanation. Some simply needed to be practiced. Years after the factory disappeared from newspaper headlines, people rarely remember my name. They remember something else instead. A small clinic. Quiet hands. Honest work. A place where no one was treated according to wealth or influence. Powerful families still search for stories about the legendary healing art. Some even visited the clinic. They offered donations, partnerships, prestige. I thanked them politely, then treated them exactly the same as everyone else. The old physician's warning had never left me. Never heal for those who believe life can be purchased. Healing belonged to people, never to power. Looking back, I finally understood the fire. It hadn't chosen me because I was extraordinary. It chose me because I still had room to become someone different. The explosion destroyed the life I thought I wanted. In doing so, it revealed the life I was meant to build. The strongest hands are not the ones that hold power. They are the ones that quietly lift others without asking to be remembered. And every morning, as I unlocked the clinic door and the first light touched the old wooden sign, I felt the same quiet certainty settle in my heart. The legendary art had never truly been about healing bodies. It had always been about healing the choices that define a life. The people who seek peace eventually discover that the greatest victory is no longer needing to win.